Everyone, soul players, we get to see you in a short period of time. I'm Tony Holmes. I'm one of the facilitators, presenter at Soul Play, and I'm joined with my co-conspirator and dear friend, Shiloh. Everyone, partiality, I just want to start by saying it's one of those big words and get us into our heads and really if when you think about inclusion and belonging, I want to bring it from the head to the heart. And part of the reason why we're having this conversation is because we're in difficult times right now. And we are also in the midst of change. And we are all working towards bringing our souls together so that we can play. And so let's dive in, talk about what multipartiality is and how we might use it at Soul Play. Often when we're in leadership positions or holding space for people, we have been I've had the experience that the message of impartiality, like a judge being impartial, is the key. But that is not the case because we're not judges. We, in fact, are inviting people to be all of who they are, and that it means multi-partiality. If you look at the Soul Play logo, for example, there's so many facets, and each of those facets is a viewpoint. However, there are some viewpoints that look larger, for example, a triangle, than others, and they have more social power. And if we, as facilitators and presenters, can balance social power, then we can begin to create a feeling that everyone belongs. Shiloh, what would you say? What else would you add?
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is this idea about how oppression is not binary and there is no right or wrong or good or bad, right? And so, but what I love about multipartiality in particular is that it acknowledges the dominant narrative while also leaving space for all of these counter narratives. It's not just one narrative that's counter to the dominant.
Often, I think people go to places like Soul Play to have a different experience. And one of the things is we don't want to just recreate the old paradigm and call it like we're doing something new. So it's in order to play and evolve, we can move into this practice. So for example, let's talk about like say pronouns. I just had a conversation with someone and I was letting them know that my oldest child is non-binary, uses they them pronouns. And we were talking about, oh yeah, I've got a child around that age too. And they were like, my child does not do pronouns. And then they were like, did I offend you? And I'm like, no, I'm not offended that you or your child don't use pronouns as and I feel your heart in that. And that's where I connect with you in wanting to know, was I offended? And also as a leader, do you mind, if I can facilitate someone using pronouns or if I can model pronouns, even though people may or may not mistake my pronouns, by looking at me, I can hold space for someone else that uses pronouns or that assumptions are made, and I can create more belonging without necessarily having to be like, this is the right way to do it, or this is the wrong way to do it. Because we don't want to get back into that thing about like, this is right and this is wrong. That's where we begin to use our wokeness as a weapon. And so I'm going to step off my soapbox. Let's go into the next part. How
Yeah.
can we practice? Go ahead. Yeah.
So I think it's really important because we're talking about, okay, so hold these multiple perspectives and do that thing. And what I really wanted to say too, just to add really quickly to your
Yeah.
story is saying that your child doesn't use pronouns is one thing, but then saying, and your child shouldn't either is where when the problem arises, right? Like, it's like, okay, cool. Your child doesn't, mine does. It's important to them. And then like having that conversation, right? So that's part of it too. Like in this way, right? In your story, Tony, you did these ways to practice. So you didn't shame this person, this parent. You didn't shame this parent, right, for not necessarily knowing and for just asking Like, sincerely, did I offend you? Like, that was a really beautiful way to like have that conversation and encourage them to speaking into action, like understand, like, this is why I do and do what I'm doing in terms of practicing pronouns, right? And then flex the muscle of empathy, right? So exactly like holding space for this other parent to let their child be the way that they are too and love them up as well, right? And having empathy for your own child and how important it is with the pronouns. Like, there's empathy, the flex the muscle of empathy goes all the way in this story. And
all the
then
way around.
all the way around, right? And
Yeah.
commit to being a reminder. So where that's through bringing, like, so in other words, like, how would you explain the commit to being a reminder, Tony? I want to give you some time on this slide.
Thank you. Well, first, I love the way that you are applying this to that story. And that's the re commit to being a reminder, I think, is one way of holding space in such a way that we welcome our hearts, keeping our hearts open and being resilient and being brave and able to, in the sense of sometimes people are going to be talking about difficult things, whether it's race or war or genocide or any of these other words that can be activating. How can we be the opening in to and welcoming into that sanctuary that soul play is for so many people?
Depending on the situation, we can flow into privilege and from marginalization. Like, it's like a spectrum, right? Or maybe more of like a spiral, because I think it's more dimensional than something linear, right? Because I don't believe in there's two opposite points. But that's the beauty of flowing in and out of that. And so what I'm thinking about in this way is being a reminder of when you are in privilege and how can you put your privilege to work for social justice.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
understanding, like, it reminds me of this book that I'm super obsessed with, Falling in Love with Being Human. And in
Mm,
here, it talks a lot about like every single person, every soul, every human, no matter what they've done, deserves love. Because if we
yeah.
really believe that love is the answer, then we have to love the people who behave in a way that we don't agree with, right?
Right.
And
It's
so
easy.
that's
Agree.
another reminder, is like, I don't have to agree with you or even like what you're doing to love you. And that is another way to practice,
I happen to
depending on.
have another book called We Will Not Cancel Us. Adrienne Murray Brown, powerful book. And it really is about this, like what I'm feeling into and leaning into. And I think that soul play has such a great opportunity for is we are now moving out of the old paradigm where we're trying to beat each other up or create where, I'm right, you're wrong. And no one wants, I don't think anyone is like gets up saying, I want to oppress people today. And how do we continue to open up new practice really is how can we practice that radical empathy? How can we be brave and be able to discuss things that perhaps I might have the privilege of not having to discuss, but someone else may not have the privilege of not having to discuss that topic? Can I be present and lean into that discomfort with them and listen empathetically, wholeheartedly from a space and humble myself to realize, you know what? I haven't had to deal with a lot of misogyny. I can be humble and hear other perspectives, and that's a practice that I can lean into without being self-righteous about it, which leads into being kind. I
These four pillars, if you will, really demonstrate is what to do when it's difficult. Because I think it's easy to be kind when you agree with somebody, or it's easy to be dedicated when it feels good. And it's even easy to be humble when you feel like, you're on the same page with somebody, right? And I think being brave is really about doing something even when you're afraid or uncomfortable. And we'll get more into detail with these four, but I know what I love about these four is they're really, when you practice them, in the difficult moments, when you're triggered, when you're having a trauma reaction, when something is not going the way you wanted it to, for whatever reason, if you can come back to these four things and breathe them in and remind yourself how to be them, I think it'll go a long way at soul play in facilitation and in creating the vibe that we want, that we all love, and that we all feel a lot of times magically on Sunday. To get more, to include more of us in that magical Sunday, we all need to practice these four pillars.
Be brave, be humble, be kind, be dedicated. I love it. And and the some of the tougher stuff on the right hand side, leaning into discomfort, being resilient, listening wholeheartedly, that active listening, not just listening so that I'm gonna be like, yeah, I'm on the same page with you, or yeah, here's my response, but really what I heard you say and what that must feel like, or being that reminder for people who are coming to soul play to find sanctuary and play and perhaps healing from some of the traumas that are in the world.
Find your lion heart. So that means that you embrace the hard stuff, right? So this work can be challenging. You can go through a myriad of emotions over the 4 days as a presenter, as a participant, all of the things, right? And so can you do the work and show up even when you're uncomfortable, even when you're upset, even when you're triggered? That's the thing. When you're, yeah, I think the leaning into discomfort is one part of it, but also just how to show up when you're not feeling, when it feels hard. In terms of being humble, right? It's like finding your soft underbelly, right? So the beginner's mindset, like what Tony was saying before, in terms of like when you're listening and you're in conflict or disagreement, let's say, spending some time not thinking about what you're going to say in response, but actually, wait, so what I heard you say was this. And that gets back to the whole practicing empathy part as well.
One of the things I've seen people use as a way of defusing and recentering is to ask questions. How did you learn this? And listen, or how does this reflect the values that it seems that we seem to hold at Soul Play? Be kind is about finding an authentic center, that place in you that is opening, that is the feeling of belonging rather than just the understanding of belonging. And from that, we can create a field of belonging, so we can have compassion for other people's journeys and even our own challenges or struggles, the things that we're practicing to learn. And in that, we can find love for ourselves and others. We can cultivate an appreciation that people may see things differently and actually value that people see things differently. And then be dedicated, like finding our feet so we can take it from theory into action, into practice by showing up, practicing that all of these combined. Being vulnerable at the same time as creating belonging is brave. And that's brave belonging, showing up for repair, being willing to perhaps see a different point of view, and looking for opportunities to, not about practicing the theory of belonging, but the feeling of belonging, so that it's not about trying to always have the right words. It's a flow, it's a practice. We're evolving together and we're growing together, and want to continue. Be kind.
Practice that we all do, and we are unlearning the default dominant practices, right? And we're practicing new ways of being at Soul Play. That is the whole point of the festival, really. So I don't think that either one of us is here presenting this information to the group as like we're perfect at this or anything, or we don't mess up. It's as important for us to be reminded and practice. And the way we learn is when we make mistakes. If we do it right, we're not really knowing it, So That is also part of brave belonging, I think, too, is being willing to make mistakes and then come back and work on the repair.
The term is multipartiality, but the practice is all of those things, that the various facets, going back to the logo of soul play, the various facets, the ways that we can see, and that knowing that that light, that soul light, it really does shine through all of us. And if there's something that causes me to contract or not see someone's soul light, then that's something that I can look at and grow and also be supported in. And we do have inclusion and belonging and soul support, and if you need support in any of this practice, you can go to soul support. You can also reach out to any of the inclusion and belonging team, and we're in this together. All right.
Thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you all.